48-hour art check, round 217. Hola, sir.
Hola. How are you doing?
Good. For some reason, my camera is really dark right now, but
It looks like you got the lights out in there.
yeah, I've got them on. I just think it's I don't know, adjust the thing. This is the type of quality that you get on live.
Should we put up one of those technical difficulties things?
We'll
There we go.
begin in a moment.
Perfect.
While Corey figures out what's going on with the thing he's done hundreds of times. So how's life?
Interesting.
Okay.
No, it's good. It's good. We just had our weekend. Our weekends are Monday and Tuesday, and we this was the weekend where we do like our big shopping trip. We venture out into the wasteland to get our supplies and provisions, and it was stressful. We both of us have been pretty good for the last few weeks, since this whole thing began. But something about yesterday just kind of had us both on edge, and Mel kind of finally had her moment to, snap and be like, this is crazy. So we had like an impromptu counseling session yesterday, but it's good. We're both good now. So
that's good. It's weird out there, man. It's just weird out there. So yeah, we live in a very small town. So even if we're like hanging out in our front yard or something, we're still not really around people. So we're able to get some sunshine and stuff. But
oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're in a pretty small town too, but not small enough. It's like a small college town, so it's still pretty active. There's still quite a few people, and we live in town, so
right.
But
cool. So should we jump in here?
Sure, let's do it.
Okay. Gotta get the right thing. Where's the thing? Boy, man, I'm firing on all cylinders today. Okay. Okay, so what did you get done?
Oh boy, a whole lot of nothing. No, that's not technically true. I got done a lot less than I had thought that I could because I didn't remember that tomorrow or yesterday was going to be our shopping day. So
I see.
With that in mind, I kind of overcommitted trying to complete anything before today. So most of my work has been today, which oddly enough, I was struggling a little bit just because I guess that's challenges, right? So progress wise, I'm still kind of where I started, but I've filled in some blanks for certain scenes that I needed that weren't already there. And I've connected some dots too that are actually incredibly exciting for me. So without giving away too much about the story, I got a lot of feedback. I put a Facebook post out, kind of just asking people their general impressions of like, what do you expect in an issue 1 that makes you want to come back to an issue 2? And
yeah, I saw that post.
Yeah, and normally I don't do stuff like that, but as much as this is a story I got to tell. There's a part of me that wants this to be a commercial success too. I want this to sell. I'm trying to make a career out of making comics, which is really hard. So it wasn't that I was going to take that advice and bend my will to change things, but something that people were saying kind of put a little bug in my ear that led me to a conclusion that I probably wouldn't have come to otherwise. And what I mean by that was a lot of people were talking about action. There's got to be something going on that's like interesting. And, when you think of comic books, you think of action. Well, my comic, I wouldn't classify it as like an action comic, but the action does ramp up like by a lot, but it takes a little bit to get there. But issue 1, not so much. There's not a whole lot of action. There's interesting stuff going on. There's intriguing stuff. There's a little bit of action, but no major conflict. Nothing like that that's going to make you go, oh yeah, cool. Like you're watching Mission Impossible or something. But I found that maybe there was potential for some action. So there's, again, without giving away too much, there's a certain character in the book who throughout the story reveals themselves to be maybe more than meets the eye. And their story unfolds as somewhat of a hero's journey, a very unexpected hero's journey, not the character that you would think that this would be the case for. And I realized, oh, total missed opportunity here. There's a scene where this character and their kind of arch nemesis are in the same room together, and it's sort of ominous. There's enough setup to where there's tension here. This could potentially be explosive, but it isn't. The character is able to go on their way and proceed through the story, and that conflict comes later. But if you think about your typical kind of action stories, or even your heroes type of stories, there's always an initial conflict with the main villain where it doesn't go well. They get beaten. You look at like the Karate Kid or something like that. It's the bully scenario of like, oh, you want to stand up to them, but you weren't able to. They knocked you down, and then you come back and you just kick their ass tenfold towards the end. But it's that initial failure that makes it more interesting later. So, long story short, because of this feedback that I got and this kind of desire to have some kind of action, it wasn't like it was totally inappropriate for my story. My story's gonna ramp up to that, but man, we're gonna have a little conflict that I didn't know was gonna be there, and it actually helped to punch up issue number 1 quite a bit, actually, and it helped me set up some stuff for issue 2. Like it's filling in all those blanks that I needed. So cool. As far as getting to the outline and finishing that part, I think this will help me get there a lot faster. It's just, this is the middle of the day. I might actually finish that after the show. We'll see. But did not accomplish what I set out to do, but definitely laid the groundwork to do so. So
that's great. And those little writing breakthroughs they're hard to plan for.
Oh yeah,
yeah. So you put in the work, and then you keep pushing until it kind of breaks. But
yeah,
it's not like you can say, I need this to break on Tuesday at 4.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Especially when you don't even know you needed it. I was content to just make this work with what I got, and now I've figured out, well, here's a big gap that you should fill too. Yeah. So yeah,
that's cool.
Sure. How about you, sir?
So I got my studio tour done. I've just got to do the different hashtags and stuff. So I go through a bunch of the art on my walls, so that'll be fun. And then I have a little some of the toys that I've got. Of course, now the video is going to stutter.
Oh, dude, is that's from Punk Rock Jesus, right?
Yeah,
dude. Wow.
Yeah, I have that, and I have one of his from Cafe Racer when he was doing that. When he was doing that little internship thing.
Cool.
Yeah, and then I've got some shots of what it looks like half the year outside of my studio, which is just a frozen wasteland. And then I go on a ride. So it's kind of a fun little bit. I've been working on it for a little while, so that'll go live as soon as I've got the like hashtags and descriptions and
cool.
And all that jazz going. And then let's see. Then I also got. I'll probably just hold this up to the screen. Is that? So I got my side profile of that guy done, and he's rigged up. And then I've got the jacket, and these don't look terribly complicated, but there's about 10 to 15 layers per thing, so that they can bend at the elbow and the shoulder and the fold, and the collar can flap. And then I've got another profile character there. And then just for fun, I did a draw this in your style of Chris McQuinlan. So that was awesome. So not quite where I wanted to be, but the day is not over, because I wanted to rig the character. Mm-hmm. So I know how to do it, but I haven't done it. I'm probably about 40 minutes away from having that side profile rigged.
Okay.
So
cool. So maybe a similar situation to me, where after the show, maybe you'll get that done too then.
Yeah. That's cool. Kind of my plan. So how about challenges?
Well, we talked about it a little bit before the start. It's been interesting. We my wife and I had some stuff happen at the outset of this whole pandemic that had us both a little bit rattled, but we recovered and we were okay. But we had this sort of shared trauma experience that was connected, but not quite about the pandemic itself. And so anyways, we've been kind of going forward, doing okay, but I think it was my wife's time to kind of have her moment to sort of shake her fists and say, this is crazy. What are we doing? So we had an impromptu sort of counseling session that used up a good chunk of that time. So that was probably the biggest challenge, is that I had to kind of sacrifice yesterday, which was the whole day to do that, which is fine. I mean, like I was saying with her yesterday, family first. At the end of the day, everything else is hopes and dreams, but what we have and that we're okay, that's what matters most. And so we really focused on that, which involved a lot of talking, just counseling each other, being there for her, talking her down from the rooftop in a sense, and then just doing things that we could do that we knew would make each other happy and stuff. So we watched like some Disney Plus stuff and whatnot. So it's weird because it sounds like it doesn't sound like much of a challenge. You just didn't do your work and you went and watched some movies and stuff. But I find that, especially working from home, this is something that I'm really used to, and maybe you can relate to this too, is working from home in itself is a challenge. Like if I were in a studio in an office or somewhere outside of my home, that wouldn't have been a factor. I would have been at work and I would have come home and go, oh, how was your day? And she would, oh, it was terrible. I can't wait to talk to you. But because I'm home, it was in that little moment where, like, I'm going to get a glass of water. There's a problem I got to solve. What is going on here? And it was like, okay, cancel the day. Which is tough, but again, like I said, there's things that I feel are more important. So we dealt with that.
Yeah. And I think a challenge, they don't always have to be negative. They just are things that impede like production time,
Yep.
And so, because I mean, sometimes there's challenges that Josh and I have talked about where it's like, I got to spend the day with my kid and go do fun things and blah, 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 or whatever, but it's still cut into the time that I normally have, so. Challenges for me, just same stuff. I'm still trying to figure out the hand thing. I might be getting to the point where I'm going to start seeking out some physical therapy. I'm not exactly sure. The heat and the ice and the stretching is getting to the point where I don't think I'm doing any further damage, but it's, but I'm having to pause a lot. Anyway, so I'm still trying to figure that out. But my wife was like, you probably need to go see somebody. When I asked, like, is it bad if I'm taking ibuprofen like every day?
Yeah, now you're in my category for sure. That's probably not a good thing.
So, anyway, so it's so that's, I mean, just that, and then I mean, I'm trying to do some stuff because I'm still like teaching, but I'm teaching from home, and so instead of like walking around the classroom, I'm like sitting in this chair. And so I'm trying to figure out ways that I can like get up. So like I made a point to stand for at least 30 minutes of each class as I was talking today. And anyway, it's not quite the same because you're just fixed in a position, but standing, but it's better than sitting. So so that's kind of, I mean, I imagine unless something major changes, I'm going to have kind of the same challenges for a few weeks. I'm just, my hands hurt and I'm still working from home. That's kind of, where I'm at. But, so how about plans? What are your plans?
Plans is still the same as the last time we talked. I really want to get this script done before the end of April, which means before the end of this week. But it kind of ties into our topic today too a little bit. So, I'm not just going to go forward no matter what. Like I believe in the idea of, it's not good when it's done. It's done when it's good, to an extent. And so, if I feel like it needs more work, I'm going to give it more work. But my plan, my goal, my hope is that, I happen to, throw together the rest of the script and go, oh yes, genius, let's go. So that is the plan.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm kind of in a similar boat. I've been toying with the writing on this first scene a bit while I'm doing some of the graphics. And so it's just I'm just kind of going back and forth, but Let's see. I have 2 profile torsos to do. I think I've got the heads for all the characters that I need in front, 3/4, and profile. So I think I'm at a point where I will probably be able to lay down some audio tracks and start syncing up the lip sync to it. I've got the scenes that I want. I've got one more scene that I've got all the assets for, but I want to lay out. And so I'm not sure how much of that I'll get done by Monday, but probably quite a bit. And this is one of those things. I have a challenge where I have to, and this should be a topic at one point in time. Sometimes I get easily excited about shiny things, right? And so I was on YouTube and I was watching, I can't remember, Dorkly or something. Okay. And I saw some 8-bit pixel animation and I thought, boy, if I use what I already know with art that can be produced that quickly, I could put some stuff out super fast. And so I downloaded a pixel editor that you can do on your phone and on your iPad. And so I have a pixel editor. I think I'm going to load some sprites into Adobe Character Animator, because the lip sync of, like, if your mouth is made of 6 pixels when it's open and 3 pixels when it's shut, that's as easy as it gets. And so anyway, so I'm going to toy with that. I've got a couple scripts that I wrote that I just haven't gotten to, and I was thinking if I can get some of those. I was thinking of, because I always want to just mock my reaction to people being idiots is just to make fun of them, and so it's kind of spawned off of our client red flag conversation. Okay. And I thought an 8-bit dramatization of just all of the client red flags that I can think of would be hilarious.
Yeah.
So I'm toying with that. When I get stuck on my main project, I might dabble in that.
That's interesting. I've been fighting back an idea that I had because of this too. Just this, short comic, like a little one-off of a client who keeps kind of adding and adding and adding until the thing is just this elaborate, extravagant, just what? But I'm fighting it off. I just can't. I know I'll go down a rabbit hole.
Yeah, and my thing is if I can do it and limit it, I'm okay. And so I try to do stuff with my 10-year-old. And so that might be kind of a fun project for the two of us to kind of just like put together some stupid animations about things or whatever.
Cool. That's awesome.
Anyway, so we'll see. So that's kind of plan B. if I need a break or whatever, if I need to be in a different position, because that's super mobile. I can be outside the hammock. I can be on the couch with my family because it's just iPad stuff. So
that's awesome. That's really awesome. That's one of my biggest challenges, I guess, regularly, is just always being in the same space because it's in my house. This is where I work. This is where I get stuff done, and I don't have much that I could take out of this space. Right. I was looking into getting some tablet that could, go around with me, but I ended up settling on the stationary one. But someday, maybe, we'll see.
Yeah,
I'll still bring the sketchbook out, but
iPads are getting fairly inexpensive, and now that you don't need a pro to use the pencil,
right?
That should be an episode that we do at some point in time. Is some of the mobile options, because it used to be you've got to drop $1,000 if you want to do it, no matter which way you go with the Surface or an iPad or a Cintiq or whatever. But nowadays, for under $300 or $400, you're golden, and you can get all set up, and some of that can be used. So
I'm loving Salazar's comment. Yeah, exactly.
I need you to do a 4-page comic, and then
you would never run out of content to keep adding to that thing.
Oh, that's funny. Okay, so let's jump into our topic here. We're going to come back in just a minute. Tell your friends, tell your enemies. I forgot to load the slide. I will load the slide while we're talking here.
Tell your cat, tell your dog.
Yeah. So we'll be back. We'll be back in just a moment with our topic. If I can push this button. Okay. Today's topic is how much planning is too much planning, or kind of that planning paralysis versus jumping into execution too quickly. And I thought that Mike would be a fun one to do this with, because for completely different reasons and completely different exercises, I think you and I have a similar temptation of just planning to the nth degree, or doing all of the prep work that you need, or whatever. Because I'll just tell a little story for those that weren't intimately familiar with the production of the anthology that we all did. Is that I saw the work that you did on your goblins when you were doing the anthology story, and it was a full-on 100% okay, in the Lord of the Rings, they designed a piece of software that they called Orc Builder. And Orc Builder was a piece of software where they gave variables to certain things. They're like torso length, bone length, girth, height, weight, blah, 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 facial structures, like the distance between the nose and the eyes.
Wow.
And then they gave the software the ability to randomize between all those things. And so instead of having Mike Emmerich sit there and design 1,000 different variations on an orc, they pushed a button and then the animators could just grab from their pool of orc extras.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Need that.
but as much variation as you can imagine in that scenario is what Mike did to get ready for a 4-page comic.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was phenomenal. I would buy an art book just full of like what Mike does to get ready for a comic, because it's just so deep. And then me on the other hand, I oscillate between, and you may do this as well, but I oscillate between two extremes. And one is, I want to plan for every contingency. And so what I've been fighting lately, because I've been doing that, I've been talking to Jim Lujan, who does animation, and Jim, he illustrates so fast and just for the scene that he needs. He's just like, I just need this guy to be in this scene in this position. So he draws him like that. And maybe he's got a little hand that's disconnected that he can kind of wave around as he's talking or whatever. Whereas I draw the character. If it's a background character that doesn't even speak, I catch myself drawing the character like fully articulated so that he could like do a cartwheel and a backflip and like talk and have it lip sync and everything. And then I'm like, this character doesn't even have lines. He doesn't even have a walk cycle. He's just sitting on a bench. But I've got him in the bag, right? And so the other thing is, I hate not producing stuff. And I'm so uncomfortable with not producing stuff that I have also caught myself, I'm getting better at this, but jumping in and just starting to do stuff before I've got storyboards, before I've got a story. I mean, the first animated short that I attempted and completely failed at, I was like 2 months into it before I was like, maybe I should write a story for this.
Right.
And then I was like, what's the best way to do a story? Maybe I'll do storyboards. But I had like built and rigged all of these assets and done all this stuff because I just wanted to be producing something. Mm-hmm. And in my mind, there are certain types of activities that count as productive and other types of activities that just feel like stalling.
Yeah.
And every time I'm writing, or every time I'm like, I'll sit down for an evening and break out all of my assets and all of the different scenes that need to be produced. Like that process of like getting my Trello board all outfitted with everything that I need to do, and like back planning and saying like where my milestones are and doing a Gantt chart, all of that feels like I'm not doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, so I just thought that would be an interesting topic to discuss, like when to jump in. And that's why in the thumbnail I did Goldilocks and the Three Bears, because
I get it.
Yeah, I think there's a sweet spot, right, where it's not enough planning and the project is going to completely fall apart, and too much planning and you're just planning stuff that doesn't matter. like, and no one will ever see. And at that point in time, you're just procrastinating actually getting to the project. And so in the middle there is the porridge that's just right. So I don't know. What do you think?
Oh man, I have so many thoughts about it because it kind of depends on what you're doing too. Like a lot of people have asked me, why do you do so much for these little projects and stuff? And one of the main things that I used to say, because I don't really have much of an excuse now because it's been quite a while, but a lot of that came from working in film as a production designer, as an art director. That was what you did. There was no other way about it. It was, we're about to spend a bunch of money on stuff, so let's spend a little money and you can draw us what that might look like. We can decide if we want to spend the money on it. Kind of, more or less have a plan in place. And then also just for creative expression, you want to really exhaust all your possibilities so that, hey, this is the one that represents what we're trying to do the best. Or just communication, working in a team. Your idea of a gypsy camp might be completely different from my idea of a gypsy camp. You might tell me a row of tents and I'll just give you a row of Coleman tents, but maybe you had something way cooler in mind, but yeah, so a lot of it kind of comes from that. Now, it's not an excuse anymore because I'm not doing that. I took that and I'm applying it to this now. And I feel like in some cases I have done more than I needed to. My other comic, Julie Jupiter, was a perfect example of learning from that mistake. I did like 3D models. I was, researching all kinds of different stuff that ended up being pointless, just utterly pointless. Like what ended up in the backgrounds didn't need to be 3D. The shots, whatever, it was a lot of work for no reason, and it added a lot of stress. But I'm a firm believer of design and really exploring stuff. So I think for me, it's a matter of learning when to stop, though. Some design is better than no design, but more design isn't always better than some design, like I think a lot of the stuff is sort of intuitive. You get an idea for character, you have a feel of what you want from them. You don't need to really extrapolate out every possible thing that they could be, because then you hit a situation where, it could be any of them. And now you've just wasted a bunch of time, So yeah, there's you could look at it in a lot of different ways.
So one thing that I've seen in myself and in students, and mostly in students because I've kind of moved past it, is the fear of wasting time causes you to waste more time than anything else. And so a lot of it is like, every semester we do a 400 level class where they're doing this big group project. And there's always at least one of the groups that has this planning paralysis. They don't want to fail. And so they spend 8 of the 14 weeks like trying to come up with all of the planning, and they do all the things, and it's like, it actually would have been better if on like the second week, if you just tried stuff that sucked and then you lit it on fire, because at least not to go down that road, or that there's part of that that's salvageable. But like in the planning of it, you don't know what you don't know. And I kind of think of it like a ship, right? And there's that old phrase, or that old saying that a ship in the harbor is safe, but that is not what ships are made for. And when you're in the harbor, like I grew up in the coast of California. So if you're in like Morro Bay, right, it's almost completely surrounded, and you get a little glimpse of about maybe 45 degrees of this 360 degree, viewpoint of where the ocean is. And the rest of it is the Bay Area that's kind of like surrounded by rocks and whatever. And so you can plot your course all you want, which is important, but until you actually like leave the bay and can see what's going on, you don't know what you don't know. And so like, I think there's a balance. I like to take it one of two ways. One way is get enough planning going that you can get started on something and then get started. And that's enough planning to know that you're headed in a direction that's going to be fruitful. So if that's a story, you don't start drawing scene 1 until you know that, that's going to bear fruit in act 3, Right. But I don't necessarily need to know the words that people say in act 3 to get started.
Yep.
on Act One. So for me, it's kind of that. Getting started will show you what you need to know because you don't know the problems yet. The other way of doing it is kind of similar. These are kind of a Venn diagram, but this is the one that I actually prefer. Is I want just a little bit more prep work than I need. I never want a little less because for me, I like batch processing. I'm much more efficient and effective if I can get into a mindset where like this week I'm inking, or this week I'm,
Yep.
Like that kind of idea that some people are able to do where they start and finish a page and they go from thumbnails to pencils to inks to colors to whatever.
Yeah.
I did that and it took forever. But when I pencil 5 pages and then I ink those 5 pages and then I color those 5 pages, I'm so much faster and I'm so much more efficient because I don't have that task switching penalty. And so along those lines, if I'm able to have a few more assets than I need, then I don't have to stop and change tasks. I don't have to go back and make more assets.
Right.
I just happen not to use like 2 of them or something.
Yeah.
But if I have like 40 more assets than I need, well, that was a huge waste of time.
Yeah, probably a problem. Yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying. I like the idea of having a solid plan because, like you said, it helps me be more efficient later, and that's really the goal. All the time, that's the goal. If I'm doing character designs, it's because I want to know what these characters look like. I want to know that they feel like they should, so that I can connect with them even on an emotional level too. So that's less thinking when I'm going to draw them doing stuff. That was one of the main things that I learned in. I took a what the hell was it called? It was like a storyboarding / character design class in college. And one of the things that he encouraged us to do is to do turnarounds, facial studies, and just basically create like a character sheet that's got different poses that sort of express the character's personality. Because then once we've established that and we're comfortable with that, it's like we know this character. So we're not spending that extra time looking for an enormous amount of references or trying to get into different poses for every last little thing we have to draw. It's more intuitive. And so you spend that little bit of time now, and then during production, you don't have to spend all that time later. You can get caught in a little bit of a trap, though, like what you were saying with the guy on the bench. I've tried to learn to batch stuff like that. So like I had some kind of characters that were going to be in Goblins, and arguably maybe this was a waste of time too, but I did like one sheet of possible people that could be in that world for that. And I didn't go overboard. It was just, this is, the 12 ideas that come out of my head. I'll pick 3 or 4 of these to actually put in the book. And what I ended up doing was like, you only saw them from a side profile really far away until you get to the end and you see 2 of them kind of close. So it was, I could have designed them in the panel, but I felt better about it. For some reason, it was like a psychological thing that it made me feel better to proceed. So there's something to say about that too. A lot of that design stuff can give you comfort moving forward. I talk to a lot of artists, especially younger artists, they're just always stressed. They're always uncomfortable about doing the thing. Either it's with the writing or it's, trying to make pages or whatever it is. They're just very uncomfortable. And usually it's because they don't have their little design Bible. They don't have their style guide, whatever you want to call it. That's like, your little set of rules. This is what it looks like. This is what the gist of what I'm trying to do. And that kind of stuff helps because then you don't have to worry about stuff like that. You don't have to think about stuff like that. Yeah. But there's the counter to that. And there was a video that was made recently. I can't remember the person who made it, but it was great. It was about getting stuck in your own fan art loop. And, oh, hey, there's some Goblin stuff. And that idea just really struck a chord with me because, in Sisyphine Complex, when I was struggling to make progress on my writing, I did get stuck in a fan art loop where Sissy was the only character that I really knew for sure. And so I just kept drawing her in all kinds of different ways. And it felt like progress because, I'm getting practice drawing her and stuff. But I mean, I'm not using any of it in the book. It didn't help me, get any further in getting a script done or anything. So you can kind of go in the opposite direction too and do too much. But as far as our topic goes about jumping in too quickly, I think, we're all creatives, we're all artists. We can spend a day or two doing stuff like, what I'm showing here, the little thumbnails. Those are just thumbnails. I did about a page a day, and by a day I mean like a few hours. They were like, I did them before dinner. I had other stuff going on that I had to take care of. So it wasn't like, a massive investment of time, but it was enough to prepare me and get me to be familiar with these characters so that I could draw them more quicker and come up with some designs that I thought were cool. And it was just a little blueprint of what I was trying to accomplish. Yeah. And I think it helped me come up with some cool designs.
Yeah, I agree, and I feel like it showed in the end result. Because I didn't do that for that one. I almost did. I mean, I did thumbnail roughs, but I almost did no character development for that 4-page story. And I think it shows because it was kind of static. But anyway, it's interesting because as you're talking about characters and getting to know the characters, I have a rule where I try to do this, and I try to do it when it's appropriate, but I don't want to write a character until I know what they love, what they hate, what they want, and what they fear. And a basic idea with that is that they have to sacrifice what they love, face what they hate to get what they want, or embrace what they hate, or face what they fear to get what they want. And then that's kind of a good character. But I don't need that for every character in my story, right? I don't need that for the guy on the bench. I just need that for the people that are going to have an actual character arc.
Right.
It can inform your dialogue and your writing, but it can also be too much. It can also be whatever. And so this is where I think the nuance and the balance comes in. Is I think you need enough planning, whether that be thumbnails or whatever, storyboards or whatever, to know what it is that you think you need. And then that is a guide. And so if I get in that thing that you were talking about, where I'm doing fan art of my own stuff, or I'm doing what I was talking about, where I'm just animating all kinds of, and rigging all kinds of characters that don't matter, I can actually look at this thing, whether it's the roughs, whether it's the thumbnails, whether it's the storyboard, whether it's the script, some sort of gauge where I say, I need this much. And so I can go a little bit beyond that, but I only need this much. And there's a thing there that I can look at, because otherwise I'm going off of feeling. And Jeff has a good comment here.
Yeah, I saw that.
It works. Different artists work different ways. Some like to plan every micro step. Some like to fly by the seat of their pants. And that's true. I think that's why this is a topic that you can discuss at length, is because there isn't like a formula, No. If there was a formula, it wouldn't be art.
Right. That's a point that I usually always try to make too, is that it's not the same for everybody. And so that example that I gave about the artists that I encounter that are struggling, and I'd said it's usually the case is that they haven't done planning, but you could say the opposite too, where maybe they're struggling with too much planning and they're the ones that needed to just dive in and do something. Right. And so it comes down to kind of knowing yourself, really. If, I'm a very meticulous, plan it out kind of person. And so I need that to feel comfortable with what I'm doing, but also something that I'm trying to learn and that I'm trying to implement in my own work is to go off by the seat of my pants more too. And ultimately, it's that combination of both that's helped me get to where I'm at now with Sisyphine Complex, where I'm almost done. Like, it's here. It's all here. It's just convincing myself that this is the right order things need to be in. Just issue 1. That's where I'm at right now. Issue 1's got to be awesome, But yeah, it was a combination of a little bit of both. Perfect example is I'm on version 4.2 now of the story. So there have actually been 4 very distinct versions of this story. And my wife and I actually had a conversation about this yesterday. She thinks it's cool. I think it's frustrating, but I'm glad that she thinks it's cool. It's interesting. But she was talking about just how different this is from where I started. But she made me feel better, because she brought to my attention that, hey, you saw certain things along the way where you said, this isn't going to work, or this isn't the story I'm trying to tell, or this person doesn't make any sense or whatever. I had my reasons for each little change, and it was flying by the seat of my pants that allowed me to go through and make those mistakes, like what you were saying about before. Like, just do it, get it down on paper, because then it is what it is, and then you can decide if you're going to go with it or not. And I wouldn't have known that if I didn't do that. And because I did that, I discovered new things and new directions, and slowly but surely they all came crashing together into this one crazy thing that I'm absolutely in love with. Like, I get behind every last thing that I'm doing in this story now. I'm just trying to shape it up, trim off the rough edges and make sure that I'm able to present it in a way that it makes sense now. But as far as the content, I believe in everything I'm doing now. Even as weird as it gets, I'm 100% behind it. Whereas before it was like, oh, I hope people like it. Oh, I don't know, and whatever. Now it's like, no, this is it. This is what it's got to be.
Yeah.
But it was that combination of flying by the seat of my pants and then also putting the time in where I felt that it needed to be.
Yeah. And you need, I like the distinction, because you need both, but everybody is going to have like a natural inclination towards one or the other, and everybody's ratio of how much of which one they need is going to be different. And it is probably going to change from project to project too. I mean, when I was doing Put Your Heart Into It, that 2.5 minute animated short, I mean, I ended up with insects, representing different things, and it was about 2.5 minutes, and it was a very simple story. Guy writes a book, it doesn't do anything. He like squeezes his heart out onto the book, and then he sells it and whatever. But I had several versions before that, whereas like everybody was like some sort of version of a cyborg or robot, and there was like, I built like a system of like value exchange where you could visibly see, how much people were exchanging. And I was thinking like it would be some sort of like liquid or oil or gasoline or something where they'd be like able to transfer it one way to the other. And I was trying to like show like the inequality, and like it just got so ridiculous that it was like, this is like, I'm going to spend way too much of my viewers' time just explaining what this is that we're looking at. And then finally I was like, as I was going through iteration after iteration after iteration, finally I was like, because I'm talking to people and all this stuff, I was like, I'll just have the guy hand him some money. Like that was that scene, was one character hands another character a stack of money. That was it.
Right.
That was the solution, but it was so complicated at first. But then even though I spent all that time doing that, and then I storyboarded it out, and then I had this ridiculous Trello board where I had literally every asset that needed to be created in each scene, like color coded and labeled according to which scene it goes into and how it's going to be used and what angle and everything. I still, as I was doing it, made changes. Like as I'm going, I would be like, I like this better. So I'd change that, or I'd push the camera in, or I'd cut a scene complete. I mean, I cut like 3 major scenes while I was animating, just because I was like, I don't think I need it. It felt like I needed it during the planning stage. And once I got in, I was like, no, it's saying what it needs to say without that.
It's crazy how that works. And that seems to happen a lot too. Like, you hear a lot of writers too say that, like, they'll write a ton of stuff, but only like a third of it ends up in the book or in the comic or whatever. And right. I had a similar thing happen recently where I'd spent months writing this whole complicated backstory about why the story that I'm trying to tell is even happening. And it got to be such a project that actually became a story in itself. And I had come to a conclusion that I could do it a lot simpler, maybe, if I did it this way. And I dropped little seeds of what that could have been in some dialogue in a way different scene that I encapsulated what was going to be like 2 issues worth of information into one thing. I didn't answer every question, but I planted those seeds. And just recently I did a little bit of a what do you call it? Like a beta reader thing where like I shared the scene with some people and had them read it. And the response was awesome. It was enough. Like, it was they're intrigued about where it's going, and there was a lot of world setup and all this kind of stuff. And that's all that it needed to be. So yeah, sometimes less is more, but it's like you got to go through there to have that journey to be able to encapsulate it somehow. I don't know.
I envy the people who have gotten to the point, and I hope to get to this point at some point. And I think we've been doing it long enough, because I know, well, I'll finish a sentence at some point in time today. But as I've done this more and more, I have come to realize that my prepping stage is shrinking. Because I can kind of, well, I'll tell you, the first animated short that I tried to do that I didn't finish because I realized this is going to be like a 4-year project, and I didn't want to do that. And so I kind of scrapped it. But it became so much that it was just ridiculous. And I was just doing all this stuff because I didn't know what I was doing. Mm-hmm. And then the next time that I did it, I was able to shrink that down a little bit. The next thing, until now, I'm not where I can just like jump in and just see what happens, but I'm significantly more efficient in what I choose to do before I get started. And so I think some of that just kind of happens, like people think it's kind of instinctual, but I think you actually train yourself through experience.
I hope so.
well, if you look at what instinct is, humans have very few innate instincts. If you blow in a baby's face, he's going to hold his breath. If you put a finger in his hand, he's going to grip it. You put something in his mouth, he's going to suck on it. If there's a falling sensation, he's going to flay his arms around. Other than that, there's not much. Everything else is learned based on either stories or a personal experience. And so anything that you find instinctual, right, is probably based on experience that's built up that has become ingrained. Like most people, when they fall, will put their hands out to catch themselves. But I knew a lady who she fell because there's ice all over the place where I live. And she fell once and she broke her wrist. And so the next time that she fell, her instinct was to not put her hands out. And so she broke her face that time. Like it was worse, right?
Oh man.
But our instinct, what we call our gut and what we call our instinct, I think is a lot of it is learned. And whether it's intentionally learned or whether it's just like, well, the last time I did that, I wasted 3 weeks and now I don't need to, right? Yeah. I mean, somebody like Jeff, he's been doing this for so much longer than I have. I imagine that his gut instinct is sharp and significantly better than mine because time on tools and just the ability to be able to do this. He's gotten to the point where he can sit down, and I'm sure there's struggle and there's still planning and whatever, but I would guess if you put time wise his up not to mine, his has been honed just because he's focused on it for so long. So that's one thing that I find kind of encouraging, is that the amount of time that I spend needing to do some of this stuff is reducing with each time that I do it.
Yeah. It's good that we have hope. I saw somebody was saying recently, another artist who's indie comic artist, that they won't do any projects if they can't do all their pre-production within 3 months. Like that's their rule. Like if it's going to take me longer than 3 months to prepare to do the comic, I won't do the comic. I really want to try that with my next project, because even since Fiend Complex was supposed to be a quick thing, it's really hard to gauge this one because of the whole hand injury that really that screwed up the whole plan. So right. It's tough to gauge on this. If I were to gauge it based on after the recovery and after the second anthology, maybe it's April and I'm almost ready to go. And I can honestly say that most of the work that is going into making this what it's going to be has been done this year, because anything prior to that has been completely scrapped and revised. There's not a single thing except for the main character that's survived those revisions. So maybe, I don't know, but I'm crossing my fingers and really hoping that after this, hopefully this is that thing that sharpens my axe and gets me to be able to do things quicker, because I can't sustain a career at this pace. Like, I'm going to keep doing it. That's not the point. I don't have to make money at this to do it. I love this, but I'd like to, be able to put out comics at a regular rate, so that readers can at least count on getting something from me. Right now, I'm the flakiliest. I'm going to make up a word. I'm the flakiliest creator. I lost my mind. But yeah, I want to be able to be accountable for what it is that I'm trying to do. Like, hey, I'm going to put a book out at this date and be able to commit to that. That's what all my heroes are able to do. That's what everybody that I ever looked up to in comics is able to do. I really need to get there. So And even 3 months for planning is a little ridiculous if you're comparing yourself to that. I mean, yeah, there you go, flakiliest.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends. I look at a lot of the pros, and they're doing, some of them are doing a book a month, and some of them, some of them are going to spend 6 months planning something, and then they produce a graphic novel length thing in 10 months or something. And,
yeah,
but it varies pretty wildly. So I don't know, this last one, I wanted to get it done in 4 weeks, but I probably spent about 4 weeks getting ready for that. And then it ended up taking me 6 weeks. And so I don't know, it's an interesting thing, because I always put time constraints on the execution of the project, but I should probably put time constraints on the planning of the project as well. It's an interesting concept. I do that with my client work. I mean, it's in the contract, I will deliver X, by this milestone.
Yeah.
But I don't do that as much with myself.
Yeah, same here. It's a weird thing too. And I've talked about it before as well. Like if I have a project that I need to do for somebody else, whether it's a commission, client work, whatever, I always get it done either on time or before, or in very, very rare cases, shortly after when the deadline was supposed to be. That's just, there's no other option about it. And there's something that goes on in my head that it's like I accept things a little easier, I think. And so I'm able to move forward, and it's for someone else, and I've taken their money. So I want to make sure that it's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, like, I'm the worst contractor for me as a client. And I don't know how to resolve that. I need to, I don't know.
The best of
something.
I was struggling with this kind of listlessness of kind of vague notions. I was being productive and doing things that I needed to do, but with no rhyme or reason or sequence or whatever. And Joshua Kimball said, you know how to do this. Just art direct yourself. Right. And I was like, oh yeah. So then I treated myself as if I was an illustrator working for me. And it was really interesting, because then I had a Gantt chart. I had plans. I gave myself tasks and due dates for those tasks. And it was really easy, because after I did that probably 4-hour planning session, I never had to think, what do I need to do next? I just looked at my task board and I was like, I have everything that I need to do in front of me. I just do the next one down the pike. It becomes a ticketing system at that point in time, where if you can plan that correctly, you just pull the next ticket off of the wall and you say, this is what I'm doing right now. And there's no hemming and hawing and going back and forth and trying to decide whether it's the right thing to do and whether it's important or not, and whether you're wasting, because you've already done all that. Right. And you put it down, and then you just grab the next ticket on the queue. So I don't know if that's helpful, but if you treat yourself like a client, And so, I don't know. And Jeff's saying personal projects are always the hardest. No deadlines or check at the end is killer. And I agree. And I think that's one of the things I like about the art check is I could probably, without checking in with anybody and without having any deadlines, I could work on stuff indefinitely forever. I know I could, because the first comic that I did, 2012, I had this vague idea that I wanted a bunch of pages in a queue before I started posting, because I wanted to get one a week going. Mm-hmm. I think I would have done that indefinitely. I think I just would have never started posting pages. But what happened is the guy from Axe Cop got married, and he's like, hey, I need some guest issues. And so I was like, I need some pages up. And so then I started posting. There was something external that caused me to get out of my own stupid little cocoon and put it out there. But I think the challenge with personal projects is that you're working for yourself. And so you don't treat it the same way as if you're working for an external force, a boss, an employer, a client, somebody who's commissioned you or whatever. And so you don't treat it the same, though. When I do, it's significantly better. When I just treat it as if I'm my client or I'm an employee working for me.
Right.
It's way easier.
we'd be like our own worst clients too, because every potential thing is so awesome. We just have to make this dinosaur scene happen with all these robots and whatever, like. But I like what you were saying about kind of having that meeting and deciding on things very early on, because you wouldn't run into that. Maybe. I don't know. I like to chase shiny things too.
You still do, because you're not locking yourself in. You can still do that, but you have something to measure it against now. Like before I would do this, I would just go wherever my heart led me, and now what I do is I check it against something, right? I've got a thing, I've got a script, I've got a storyboard, I've got an asset list, I've got a whatever. And if I have this crazy idea, I now hold it up to that and I say, does this serve the story, or is it just visual masturbation? Is it just pointless emptiness, or does it have some kind of meat to it, right?
Right.
And if it's a better way to tell that story, or it makes it more engaging, great. That's great. I had an idea that improved it. But if I look at it and I'm like, it's kind of sixes, and this one is going to take me 10 times as long, and I'm just fascinated by it, I'll probably, put that off. Because do you have a morgue file?
No.
Oh,
maybe I do, and I just don't know. Maybe I call it something different.
So sometimes I've also heard it called a sometimes maybe file, but basically it's an area where you never kill anything. You just you put it in this place, and then when you're dry for ideas, you can just go to that place.
Yeah.
And I literally was doing this last night, where I'll have dialogue or ideas for scripts or stories or a conversation of two characters that pop into my head, and I'll write them down, but it's in the middle of me doing something. So I put it in my morgue file. And then when I'm like, oh man, what should I be doing? I can look at that morgue file, and sometimes I can cannibalize some of that stuff and use it. But when you do that, it's interesting, because you're not saying no to it. You're just saying not right now. Mm-hmm. And so in your mind, somehow it's easier.
Yeah. Interesting. I have something like that called brain farts. That's I have like a folder. It's not necessarily per project. It's just sort of in general, like, hey, this would be cool. And sometimes I have cannibalized some stuff from that and turned it into something else. That's actually where Sisyphine Complex came from, was mm-hmm. one of those. So yeah, that's useful too.
Cool.
So a question on the topic of jumping into execution too quickly. How do you know? What do you feel what are like the telltale signs that you would say that you would know that you're jumping into execution too quickly?
I don't know. Telltale signs. I think if at the end of it, I wonder why I did that.
Oh,
so I don't know. I don't know how helpful that is, because it's like, you drive somewhere for 3 days, and then you get out of your car and you're like, why am I here? That's usually my experience, is like, why did I spend the last 6 hours making this thing? I don't know where I'm going to use it. But there's probably better roadmaps better flags that are kind of earlier on. Just nothing's coming to mind. I think most of my experience is kind of that. But if you're able to just guess and just say, what is the point of this? And if you don't have a clear answer of like, character is going to be in the next scene, or this character is going to be the background here, or I need someone to do X, or, I need an asset that does whatever. You're probably just messing around, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't want anybody to watch this and feel like they can't play, because I think play is important.
Sure.
But I would say if at any point in time I realized that it doesn't have a direct application to what I'm producing, because I keep finding myself doing that. Like, I have on my iPad about 5 fully rendered characters that I don't have in the script at all. I'll probably find a place for them, but they're just there.
Just hanging out.
Yeah. And I'm hoping that I can build up a repertoire of that, so that in the midst of it, if I'm like, oh, I need like a 4th person in this scene, that I don't have to stop. I can just grab it. So I don't know if I'm justifying my waste or if that's just pure waste, but I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that because I think I still struggle with it. So I'm not sure.
Me
do
too.
you have any indication?
Well, I know I'm uncomfortable starting something if I don't have some kind of plan in place. Like, I think a perfect example is kind of where I'm at now. Like, I would not start drawing page 1 of issue 1 right now. I feel very unprepared for that, despite having a complete script. But I know that it doesn't read the way that it needs to read. I know that it isn't accomplishing what I needed to accomplish, and that feeling concerns me.
Does it not read like the lettering, the dialogue, the narration, or is it the sequence of events or what's in the panels?
Yeah, well, sequence of events and making sure that where one ends and the other begins is a good transition and is meaningful, as opposed to just sort of arbitrarily jumping around, which is kind of, I mean, I did that with the seat of the pants way, because just to get things going, it's like, I need this to happen, this to happen, this to happen. Let's try that. Which isn't to say that I can't do it. Like I said, I've done most of my work before the show today, and I'm gonna keep going afterwards. Like it's there. I got faith that I could finish this by tomorrow, but I wouldn't start drawing pages today is what I'm getting at. It's not cohesive enough, and the changes that I would make, if I do make them, would drastically affect it. I mean, it really, especially if you're going to do like scene changes on the page instead of like on a page turn or something along those lines, which I have a few plans to do, sort of, I don't know what the term is, but instead of like an abrupt scene change, I have like a gradual scene change. So where like panels are kind of intermixing until we're in another scene, kind of like a fade in a movie, you know, like, oh, I remember the time back when you and your father met, and you know, that kind of thing. That would be an example for me of knowing that I'm not ready, is just not having a clear plan of what page 1 is going to be. That's a problem. Or a better example would be designing too much on the page. You know, if I'm stuck in a rut where it's like every other panel or every other page, there's something that I didn't even think about, that's a problem for me. That's not a problem for everybody, though. I have some friends that work that way. They express their frustrations, but they also don't say that they would do it any differently either. So I don't know.
You
I envy the people who can just go by the seat of their pants and get stuff done and do awesome work. That I strive to be able to do that at some point. I don't know how to trick myself into doing that and being comfortable. I'm a very anxiety-ridden person when it comes to not having a plan. But yeah, I still have to, play to that though, because that's who I am and that's how I work. So for me, that's my red flag, For somebody else, I don't know. Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe it's that anxiety that you need to break through and you do just need to jump in. I can relate to that too. I made some really shitty, horrible first comics. Not to say that everyone's are going to be shitty, but I had to do them because I was just stressing about how to do it. I had to just make up my own way of doing it.
Well, I call that running the water clear. If you go into a house with really old pipes, the water that's sitting in those rusty, nasty pipes is going to be brown. It's going to taste like you're licking a roll of quarters or something. Mm-hmm. But if you just run that water for a few minutes, eventually it'll run clear, And so I think all of us have to get the crap out,
just get the crap out
before the good stuff comes. Let the water run clear. There, you had mentioned something. You had mentioned something about faith, and Jeff also made a comment along the same lines where he's saying, is the planning an excuse to not start the page 1,
right?
Or is it really necessary?
Right.
And so I was thinking of this concept of leap of faith that you hear about sometimes in religions or in spirituality or whatever, where to a certain extent you have to kind of like, step to the edge of the light and then step into the darkness and hope that the light follows you. There is that moment that you don't know,
right?
If there's not a clear path that you've laid out. You have to kind of move forward based on what you've experienced. But what you don't do is you don't just sprint, in any direction. and just hope that the light follows you. It's a process of kind of heart and mind, where there is some sort of thought, like I believe based on what I've studied and my experiences that going in this direction is going to be useful. And so then the leap of faith comes where you jump, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And you can kind of do that with Just Kind of, it's interesting because the same type of activity can be really valuable or really detrimental. And it's not that the activity is good or bad, but it's the reasons that you're using to do it. And so I always go back to the Art of War, the War of Art. The other one. Yeah.
Sun Tzu or what's
I used to like Sun Tzu in my early 20s when I was really combative and now I actually hate most of that book.
Stephen Pressfield, right? That's right, the War of Art. Yeah.
But he talks about certain things, and he says you can tell whether it's resistance or not.
Oh yeah.
Based on how you feel about it afterwards, or how if you feel empty after completing that task or after doing that thing, then you were using that to procrastinate. And so it's an interesting thing to say, to really internalize, because sometimes I am planning out of fear. I am it's a safe place to be when you're planning, because if things are all in your head, they can never suck. Right. But
right.
As soon as you execute them, they exist and they can be judged by people objectively. Mm-hmm. And those people can say that's terrible or that's great. But in my mind, no one can say that. It's an idea that I have. It could be a super fully formed idea, or it could be a vague, kind of fart in the wind or whatever, but no one can judge it. There's nothing tangible that they can see, but as soon as you execute it. So sometimes there's that fear of I don't know if I'm ready yet. I don't know. Blah, blah. And I anytime I'm doing anything out of fear or coercion, as soon as I recognize that, I immediately stop doing that thing and move in a different direction, because I refuse to be motivated by fear or force. And so that's an interesting thing. You could say, are you still needing to plan? Because the answer could be yes. Or are you scared to put down page 1 because you've been working on this for so long that, whatever? Because the answer to that could also be yes.
Right. Yeah.
And that doesn't necessarily mean that your planning is good or bad. It's just why you're using it and how you're using it.
Yeah.
It's an interest that to me, I like that Jeff said that, because that to me is a good way to gauge our activity.
Totally.
Is this still valuable, or am I just operating out of fear?
Right. I think in my case, honestly, it's a necessity at this point.
Yeah.
But I definitely connect with what you're saying too, and I think that has played a role at different stages throughout this. Absolutely, mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of a peaks and valleys situation too, of feeling confident and getting work done confidently, and feeling not confident and procrastinating and doing other things and stuff. Right now I'm on a very very shallow upward slope of just kind of recovering from this last few months and just a nasty depression. So if anything, I'm just sort of trying to pick the pieces up where I left off, and just finish what I started. That's where I'm at now. Just finish what I started.
Yeah.
I'm concerned that once I do have the script finished, though, that I'll feel a little bit of that apprehension to push off page 1 because of all those fears and stuff too. Absolutely. But
sure.
I can't allow that to stop this. That's not an option. This thing has to come out. But as long as I get this done, now the end of April is going to be tomorrow. So fingers crossed, if I can get a really good work day in for the rest of the night and then just all day tomorrow, I really hope that I can just finish this script and get ready to start drawing it come May. If not, I don't want to put much more time into it. I'm still going to keep pushing and pushing.
Yeah.
But it has to come out. And if I can get it done at least within a week or so from now, then I'm still on schedule, and it's still perfectly reasonable for me to come out with this comic when I wanted to. So right now it's okay. I feel like it's okay. Mm-hmm. Once I get to May, then I have to start to really evaluate, is this procrastination or not? Because right now I'm still on schedule. I'm running a little bit behind, but if push comes to shove, I think I could at least figure out what page 1 should be. So I'm at least there. But that's actually kind of the hardest part right now. And I don't know, that could be a whole other episode, is literally just figuring out which scene is the best scene to open this book. Because I have 3 contenders right now, and it's kind of a matter of, well, whatever. That's what I'm going to worry about tonight. But
yeah. Interesting. Yeah, that's good. I also think, and this let's wrap here, but I think a good thing to remind everybody of, us included, is any type of movement during the weird hellscape that we're living in right now is good. Because I mean, I don't think anybody should be beating themselves up if they've got anxiety or depression or whatever. I mean, like, if I didn't have like classes on a specific day, I don't even know if I'd know what day of the week it was anymore, because like, it's just a weird existence that we're in right now. Everything's kind of bleeding together, and there's like nothing's really happening, but then there's looming off in the distance the threat of like a global economic collapse and death. And, it's like, but it's not like an immediate threat. It's just sort of there.
Yeah.
So it's just a weird mental space to be in. So yeah, it's anyway. So I get that. And so. All right.
Thank you, Jeff.
So Jeff says you can do it, Mike. Everybody's rooting for you. That is true. And where can we find your stuff?
You go to my website, sisyphenecomplex.com. That's where I'm posting all of my my illustrations and stuff, and you can get to all my stuff from there. I just put a new print out that's up in my shop. I thank you to everybody who's been buying it too. That's awesome. I've at least woken up to a new sale every day, which is awesome. That's helping me out a lot. That's pretty much it. That'll be where the comic ends up first, for sure, at least in previews or whatever. But
awesome.
Yeah.
And that poster is gonna be in the thing I'm animating right now, which I'm excited about.
It's awesome. So. I got to finish filling out that form too, actually.
Yeah. don't spend too much time on it. It's not a big deal, but just yeah. And you can find my stuff at CoreyKerr.com. You're on my channel, so click the thumbs up to let the stupid algorithm know that this was worthwhile. And we'll see you guys on Monday.